Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
It's 8:07 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Listen, and right after we get through with our interview with Tucker Carlson here in a second, we're going to open up the phone lines, 1-888-630-9625. We want to discuss this divide that we saw developing in the GOP as we watched what was going on at CPAC. Want to know which part of the divide are you aligning with? Are you aligning with the Rand Paul wing of the Republican Party, or do you have some concerns about that? Where are you in this debate that's going on in the Republican Party? 1-888-630-9625, 1-888-630-WMAL. Brian Wilson with Larry O'Connor on the Newsmaker Hotline is our good friend from the Daily Caller, Tucker Carlson. And Tucker, I saw you over at CPAC briefly. It was good to see you. I don't think I've ever seen you looking more well. You look great.
What? Well, that's...
I mean, no, you just...
Thank you. I was invigorated by the intellectual stimulation there, the atmosphere. It was great.
Well, listen, let's talk about, though, because there is a divide in the GOP to some degree. The GOP can't really decide what it wants to be, and I think if you looked at what was going on at CPAC, this became quite evident. What are your observations about all that?
Well, there are a lot of divides, but I would say, and you probably came to the same conclusion, the basic divide is between the establishment wing of the Republican Party, especially on foreign policy, and the Libertarian wing, as embodied by Rand Paul. And every person under 35 I ran into had a I Stand With Rand sticker on. And I have to say, I am really struck by the almost hysterical and certainly disproportionate reaction from a lot of the establishment people in the Republican Party about Rand Paul. You know, calling him names, he's crazy, he's, anti-Israel, he's a threat. I mean, it's too much. Rand Paul is actually a pretty conventional guy. He's not a black helicopter person. He's not a flat-out isolationist, but you would never know that listening to these people. I mean, they truly hate Rand Paul, and I think the problem is that Rand Paul challenges GOP orthodoxy on foreign policy, and so if you've, uncritically supported the war in Iraq for the last 10 years, or if you think we ought to remain in Afghanistan to ensure, voting there for the next 100 years, you see Rand Paul as a threat to your ideas. But most people, I think, agree with Rand Paul on those things.
Tucker, I noticed, going into CPAC, a lot of noise was being made about who wasn't invited. Groups like Go Proud, and I think you had a really great headline at the Daily Caller on that. What was it? The CPAC's big gay problem, I think it was, or something like that. But what struck me, though, Tucker, is once we got to CPAC, the social issues like same-sex marriage, like abortion, like other things that often are seen as controversial social topics, didn't really make its way up to the main stage. I mean, it seemed to me that given the fact that Go Proud spends most of his time talking about fiscal issues, they would have fit in right at home. Did you notice that?
Well, I always thought that. I'm not an expert on Go Proud, and I'm not, actually super interested in the issues, but I know Chris Barron, who works at Go Proud, and he's, I think gay and for gay marriage, but other than that, I think he's more conservative than Mitt Romney.
But it seemed to me
I never felt they were like secret leftists.
But didn't it seem like the social conservatives didn't really have as big a voice as certainly I was expecting?
No, that's probably true. I mean, it seems to me, again, the divide is on, and the press sort of misses this, is on the foreign policy questions, is on the question of, intervention, nation building. I think the average Republican primary voter doesn't think it's worth seeing Americans die in order for, women to have the right to drive taxi cabs in Kabul or whatever.
Yeah.
The human rights issue of the moment is. Those are all great. I mean, I'm for universal suffrage and equal rights, and of course I am. I'm an American. But I'm not for, sending my son to go die to secure those rights for people who hate me anyway.
Tucker,
I think I speak for most Republicans when I say that.
You've been in Washington a while. You see the industry here that is centered around politics, and there was a lot of dart throwing there from, you had on one side your Pat Caddells and your Brent Bozells and Sarah Palin kind of hammering Karl Rove as the representative of all these consultants, these paid consultants that these days through the Congressional Committee for Re-election and the Senate committee for re-election, they end up, saying to these local candidates, okay, we'll give you the nomination, you're our candidate, but if you don't use this consultant that we tell you you've got to use out of Washington and pay them, you're not going to get any money from the party. Do you see this as becoming a pretty big dogfight?
Yeah, I mean, and that's, of course, a problem. There are a ton of sleazy consultants out there. A lot of them are getting rich. I live near a lot of them, so I can vouch for their richness, for sure. The irony, though, is that these charges are being thrown by almost always people in the conservative nonprofit sector. And if there's a more useless group of people in the world, I'm not aware of it. I mean, conservative nonprofits in Washington consume, over time, over the last 40 years, literally billions of dollars. And the country has become much more liberal in every single way. So they have failed to do anything other than, buy weekend houses and send their kids to college. I mean, they've profited from it, but they haven't won, any important ideological victory in 30 years. So, wait a second, they need to re-examine their own status. I mean, these are parasites, too, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, let me
really are.
Just a quick follow-up, because you're making it sound like this is really a battle over money. Are you saying those nonprofits are hammering consultants like Karl Rove because they don't like all that money being donated to the consultants instead of going to the nonprofits?
I'm saying they ought to take the plank out of their eye before they point out the speck in their neighbors, I guess, is what I'm really saying. I mean, I think there are a lot of really sincere, decent conservatives working in nonprofits. I know them, of course. I don't want to make a blanket indictment. However, they, as a group, have achieved virtually nothing in the last 30 years. I know because I've lived here. And look at the results. Our taxes are higher. More people are pro-choice. I mean, all their stated goals have not been achieved, and they've consumed a huge amount of money doing it. So it's time for some serious soul-searching. And for those people to get up and start screaming about how other people are wasting money and aren't sincere and are cynical, I mean, it's nauseating. To me, I'm not a consultant or an employee of a nonprofit, so I think I can see it with some clarity. There are a lot of parasites on the, on conservatism. It's disgusting.
You had this big, as a part of all this, you had this big spat between Karl Rove and Sarah Palin. Is that helpful, or does it just make us look like a bunch of goofballs who are divided?
No, I mean, it's kind of hilarious, I guess, but no, I don't. I mean, it certainly doesn't get anyone elected. I mean, I think Sarah Palin is a good speaker and all that. I'm not clear what Sarah Palin does exactly. So it's
But what she does is she goes to CPAC and she stands in the podium there and she attacks people like Karl Rove, and then Karl Rove goes on his little platform on the Sunday talk shows and he attacks Sarah Palin. I'm not sure that in the grand scheme of things that's helpful.
No, and by the way, I mean, I'm a journalist. I don't want to take sides in that battle at all, but I will say Rove's comeback had one line in it that it was indisputably true. She was the governor of a state, and she did not finish her term. So if you care about the ideas she says she cares about, and clearly as governor you have a chance to affect those ideas, to put them into practice, and you split before your term is even up, you have no grounds for criticizing anybody. You blew your chance. What's the explanation there? It was hard to be in governor? I mean, are you joking? I just don't have... I'm sorry, that's just true.
All right, Tucker, I think you've given us a lot of stuff to talk about with the great listeners of WMAL over the
Which includes Nancy Pelosi, by the way.
Which does include Pelosi.
Good. Everyone listens to your show. I listen to it every single day.
Well, thank you very much, Tucker. That's very kind.
Thank you, Tucker Carlson. Always great to have you. And the rest of you, we want to hear from you now. What do you think of what he had to say and this ongoing discussion within the party? 888-630-9625.